Right. And so many people have lost their jobs as a result of the COVID pandemic. And with 3 COVID vaccines approved for use in the U.S., employers who want to ensure a safe transition into the workplace may want to know whether their employees have received one of the vaccines. So will employers start to ask if their employees have received the vaccine, or even mandate that employees be inoculated before returning to work? Joining us now to discuss is employment law attorney Domenic Romano. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you with us. I guess the first and most obvious question is, can employers do this?
Well, Heather, it appears that they can. The EEOC issued some guidelines back in December. As long as it's required as part of the job to come into contact with people, as long as there's a rational reason for requiring mandatory vaccination, and as long as that employer is respectful of people's religious observations or pre-existing medical conditions that would make vaccination dangerous, then vaccination may be required by employers.
What about the timing of all of this? Because not everybody has access yet to the vaccine. So are employers able to say willy-nilly, sorry, you haven't had it, you can't work here? Or do they have to give it, for instance, till the end of the summer?
Bob, that's a great question. And yes, the wise approach here is to encourage vaccination at this point, not to make it mandatory for right now, because you're right, it's an access question. But I think we're going to see that as the months move on here, as vaccination becomes more prevalent, you're going to see in certain instances, in certain industries where there's a lot of contact between people, not just to protect the customers, but to protect one's own workforce, your fellow employees, employers might take action there. So
what is the difference between demanding to know something like this with an employee versus, protections when it comes to your health records and those types of things? Why is this different?
Well, Heather, you can ask an employee if they've been vaccinated at a certain point. What you can't ask is why they haven't, for example, been vaccinated. You can't pry. There are certain privacy restrictions there, but ultimately, it's going to be possible to have vaccination as a condition of employment if it's necessary by the scope of work. For example, in an office environment, when you're far away from other people, probably not. But for example, if you have a job that requires you to get on a plane and get on a plane often, then, or to deal with people, to be in very close contact with people, then yes. There's a Supreme Court case dating back to 1905 that says that states and governments generally can require vaccinations, and by extension, employers in certain employment categories.
But Domenic, you said earlier that as long as the employer doesn't impose on someone's religious rights or their health, if they did it for health reasons, if they choose not to get it for health reasons, what if they come back and ask you, well, why haven't you got it, like what you just said, and then you don't want to answer, and it was for religious reasons or for some sort of health reason?
Look, I think the EEOC is taking this on a case-by-case basis. So generally speaking, the best thing to do here, where it's a part of the job description to be in close contact with other people's fellow employees or also with customers or clients, mandatory vaccination, it looks like it's going to be permissible, it's going to be sanctioned. The question is, how can that happen, I think, to your point, while being respectful of people's medical privacy? And that's going to be a very fine line.
We've got 30 seconds. Is there an umbrella excuse that people might want to use so they don't get it? There are people that may not want to get, I think about a third of the U.S. population may not want to get this.
Look, if they're in a job that doesn't require, again, being in close proximity with people, it's a non-issue, right? No one's going to be forced to take the vaccine. Most of the population is not going to be forced. But if you're in the type of employment that you're going to be very, very close to people, I think having a pre-existing medical condition that makes vaccination dangerous or having a religious grounds for saying no, that might be your ticket.
Got it.
All right. Domenic Romano, thank you so much. Great advice.
My pleasure, Heather. Thank you, Bob.
And we'll be back.